Welcome everybody, it's Hawk here, and I just wanted to take you through a short presentation on how I plan to create my miniature self-sustaining biotope, or I'll call it my ant-keeping adventure. So I decided I wanted to keep ants, especially after watching the Ants Canada YouTube clips. I really got that itch to get inside of myself. I've actually gone ahead and ordered some queens already, but I'll tell you more after that. I made accounts on different ant forums just to get more information, more practical do's and don'ts, because I wanted to be prepared for when my queens actually arrived. And then I was left with a choice to select one of the 183 reported indigenous species in the Netherlands. There are so many to choose from. All right. I must admit I was a bit overwhelmed just by the sheer numbers of the species. I had no idea there were that many. I wanted a species that was suitable to me, so I really had to narrow down the list and come up with some preferences. And this is what I came up with. Size. I wanted my ants to be easy to see. I didn't want to have to play around with a magnifying glass or anything like that. I preferred if they didn't have any stingers because I don't like to be stung, and I prefer them not to be particularly aggressive. Also, I'd like them to stay in their surroundings and not be very good escape artists, as I plan to house them in my living room or my study. I don't know yet. And I wanted them to be relatively easy to keep at or around room temperature in specifically, and just easy to keep in general. I chose Camponotus Ligniperda. Just look at this beauty. Alright, some general information. One queen species, which is very big actually. The two queens I have easily reached the 20 millimeters. They have work as minors and majors, anywhere up to 15 millimeters. They fare well at room temperatures. They do require some low temperatures for hibernation though. Furthermore, they're very easy to take care because they eat honeydew and insects for their protein. Now, some things that do have to take into account, they normally live in forested areas or at the edge of forest. They like boring into decaying wood, making a nest in there, or burrowing straight underneath the rotting wood. And compared to other species, they prefer a relatively dry nest. So I wanted to make sure I had suitable surroundings to house them. For now, they're fine in a chest tube. They're in a dark cupboard. I try to not disturb them. Obviously, I have to take a peek every now and then or feed them like a drop of honey, but otherwise, I don't come near them because they want to be left undisturbed. After that, I've actually already ordered the large Camponotus hybrid nests at antscanada.com. Plan to house them in there, so I give the growing colony some room to grow. And then comes the big one. I want to give them a natural setup. All right, natural setup. So what am I thinking about? I'd like a terrarium part filled with forest soil, or at least something that approximates forest soil. Then I want that surrounded by water. Why do you ask? Well, they need water to drink, and I don't want to have like a test tube in there with a cotton bowl for them to get to clean drinking water. Another benefit is that hopefully the water will prevent them from escaping. And I assume that it will take a while, but if the colony actually gets big enough, the ants will probably try to dump their waste and dead ants into the water. There is a but, there's always a but. The water has to flow. Stagnant water is a breeding ground for all sorts of nasty things, which would be unhealthy for the ants as they would drink from the water. All right, basic setup for the terrarium. Layer of hydro pellets at the bottom, covered with anti-roots fabric. just to make sure that if there is excess water in the terrarium, it will obviously it will sink to the bottom, but it will remain there and it won't affect the nest and it won't cause any roots of my plants to go rotting in there. Because once it's in there, I don't want to disturb them if I don't have to, and I don't want to go digging up rotten plants. On top of that, a layer of charcoal and a layer of cocoa fibers. These are actually very good at harvesting moisture. And on top of that, just regular soil, which will be a combination of regular potting soil, leaves, probably some little stones and stuff in there. Just want to approximate the soil they can find in a forest. Now this setup is mainly because this will give me a scale of humidity. The bottom will be more humid and the top will be less humid, so the ants can actually burrow into the ground and find the most suitable place for themselves, for their larvae, for their stored foods. Pretty much they can decorate the place as much as they see fit. Oh, I almost forgot the size. It's about 92 centimeters wide, 50 centimeters tall, and 50 centimeters deep. So it is actually quite a large space I intend to make for them. But then they are large ants. All right, so we've got our ants. They need food. For protein, I can feed them insects. Flies, crickets, mealworms, fruit flies, maybe the occasional, whatchamacallit, I can't think of the name now, obviously. I'll get back to that. And they will need a form of carbohydrates, so sugars or honeydew. All right, if we feed them that, the queen will start producing eggs, which will in turn turn into more ants. It obviously will actually result in them pooping a lot, and feeding them insects will also cause other waste, like for instance the exoskeletons of the insects that they won't eat, and eventually dead ants. Now, the column on the left is actually a controllable input because I can decide how much I want to feed them. The one on the right, however, is potentially harmful to ants because having all their waste in there or having the dead ends in there could attract fungi and molds. If they do actually dump all that stuff in the water, it could poison their own water supply. And that's something we want to prevent. So how to deal with all this waste? Springtails. The springtails will actually very happily munch down on their waste and the dead ends, and actually they will take care of plant matter, fungi, and molds for me as well, and turn that into nutrients for any plants I want to plant. On the plus side, springtails themselves are insects, and they will be food for the ants as well, whether they are caught alive or whether they die and then get eaten by the ants. They're actually a food source. Next to that, we'll add some earthworms as well, which will convert plant matter, fungi, and molds into even more plant nutrients. Next to that, they'll actually aerate my soil a bit more and improve the drainage, etc., etc. Right, plants. Since we've got creatures in the terrarium providing me with free plant nutrients, I might as well use those nutrients. And I plan to use them to my benefits, as I want to plant some nasturtiums and some Chinese spring rose. Why, do you ask? Well, these plants are known to attract aphids. Obviously, you guys know that aphids produce honeydew and that the ants love this honeydew. So I fully suspect my ants climbing these little plants, looking for the aphids, milking them for their honeydew, and generally guarding them from attacks from other insects. And that actually makes life easier on me because I don't have to feed them any sugary water, any honey or things like that if they've got sufficient amounts of aphids. Now, obviously, these plants will drop leaves, or actually the nasturtiums are seasonal, so they will eventually die out and have plant matter for the springtails to dine on and feast on. Obviously, I don't intend to fill my terrarium up with only those two type of plants. I will get more ficus, I will get some moss, ferns, probably an orchid to grow up to the wood I would like to plant in a terrarium. Now, bear in mind the one on the right is about 75 centimeters tall. I'm guessing that's about 2.5 to 3 feet. I'm not entirely sure. So this is a bit too big, but I do want to offer them something like this so they can actually burrow into the wood or have a lot of surface area they can walk on and climb on and generally make their surroundings more interesting. And the plants I selected, obviously they live in forested areas, but I can't really give them a forest in a small terrarium. So I do want to give them plants of different heights, plants that offer them some shade, so they generally have darker areas. The moss I will mostly plant on the sides where the ground meets the water, so it's a more natural flow into the water, and you see less of the plexiglass walls. So what about the water? This is how I plan to house them. You can see the terrarium part in the middle and then a lot of water on the outside. Just to give you an idea, this tank is about 1 meters and 20 centimeters wide, 80 centimeters deep, and 46 centimeters high at the front. Actually, that's the water itself. The tank is 50 centimeters high. That's just a couple of centimeters different, so it doesn't actually flow into my living room. That means it's about 230 liters of water, or 60 US gallons. Now, I did say I wanted to have it float, so I wanted to have a waterfall as well. Water will come in from the top from a filter pump I will show you later on. Flowing down a little ramp I incorporated, and then it will drop about 10 centimeters into the water below. Now I've placed a little divider right behind it. It's actually a little bit lower than the water level because I didn't want it to be a bridge for ants to cross to get to the glass wall. So there will be some water recirculating, but eventually water will flow out through an overflow I've put on the side. So I should have a pretty good current. Well, you can actually see how the water will flow. But wait, there's more. There's not one, but two refugiums. 55 times 55 times 55 centimeters, giving me another 200 liters or 52 US gallons of water to play around with. Now, basically, for the aquarium part, the more water you've got, the more stable it is, the more forgiving your water environment will be. Obviously, you're bound to make some mistakes at one point or another. It's inevitable, but the more water you've got, the more surface area, the more content you've got to forgive you for that. Now, in the refugium, I actually placed some dividers that will intentionally direct the water to flow a certain way. So it comes in from the top left. Actually, there's going to be a spray bar over there, to aerate the water further, increase oxygen in there, and then it's going to flow down and up and down again, and then through a tube to the refugium on the right. In this tube, I'm actually gonna place a tap as well. So should I want to drain my tank for some reason, this is going to be the lowest point, and it will just facilitate things. Right, over here, the water is going to flow up, and I've actually created two holes on the top over here, so the water will flow more at the surface, and then over there it will be pumped out to the filter. So fast moving currents on the left and on the top, and actually slower currents on the bottom. Right, the filter pump, the F-2000 Eco. Here he is. And I'm gonna fill it like this. Bio balls, they're just basically gonna bounce around at the very bottom. They're just there to catch the largest of dirt that might flow into the filter pump. Some coarse foam, some medium foam, and then some fine foam to filter out coarse, medium, and fine debris that's floating in the water. And the rest I'm just gonna filter out with filter medium that actually holds beneficial bacteria. So dirty water is gonna flow in from the bottom up to the top, and hopefully some clean water will come out. Now this pump actually pumps a maximum of 2,000 liters per hour. That's in perfect condition, so I do expect it to be a little less, but it's more or less 4 times the entire contents of my water setup. It's going to be pumped through these filters and the filter medium. So I am reasonably sure that this pump will actually be very good for my setup. Especially because I'm going to have some other beneficial stuff in there, but I'll get to that. Right, meet the inhabitants. Right, these are the creatures I plan to house inside my aquarium. As you can see, there's some freshwater mussels, I've got some shrimps, I've got algae eaters, I've got a number of fish, and I've got some snails to finish them off. And actually, in the refugiums, I want to plant some creatures as well. I want to use it to breed snails, which I can then feed to the ants and to the fish themselves. I want to have water striders and I want to have water fleas, which will be a natural source of food for both my ants and my aquatic creatures. And furthermore, I'm going to have the freshwater mussels inside Refugium, and I'm going to try to get my shrimp to breed in the Refugium itself as well. All right, so my water biotope, how does it look? Obviously, we've got an input that's going to be dead ends, controlled by the ants themselves. They decide how many and when and if they want to throw them into the water. Obviously, with water, there's going to be some algae and there's going to be some decaying plant matter. Now, as I said, I plan to feed them snails, water fleas, and water striders, so that's actually going to count as an input as well, albeit a more controllable input. Snails and water striders I can feed to my ants, so I actually don't need to go out and buy extra stuff to feed the ants because I'm going to grow it myself. Right, the dead ends, water fleas, water striders, and the snails are all going to be food for my fish. I've only included one species in this, but you'll get the general idea. They will eat these creatures and excrete waste. That's where the shrimp come in handy, because they will happily munch on this waste. Obviously, they're going to eat water fleas, algae, and plant matter as well. Even though I've got algae eater fish that are going to dine on plant matter and algae, produce waste, and actually that waste is going to go back to the shrimp, which then in turn actually it will shed its skin when it grows, so the exoskeleton will be left in the waters, and hopefully they're going to produce baby shrimp. Now, you probably know where I'm going with this. The baby shrimp will be food for both my fish and my ants. The exoskeletons will be food for my springtails. Not sure if the earthworms will dine on them. Possibly the ants will have a little nibble, but I think they'd be more interesting in the inner sides of the shrimps. Now the shrimps themselves are also gonna produce waste, obviously, and that's where the freshwater mussels really come in handy because they're gonna filter out my water. An adult mussel is going to be able to filter about 10 liters of water per hour. Now, I do say they're going to filter out the waste. Actually, they mostly dine on microbes and really tiny little creatures that will use the excreted waste from the fish, the shrimp, and all the other creatures to dine on, and then the mussels is actually going to filter them out for me. Oh, I almost forgot the snails. The snails are obviously going to eat algae and plant matter as well, excrete waste, which is then going to be beneficial to the mussels. Now the Refugium, as I said, on the left I'll have a fast flowing tank, on the right I'll have a slower flowing tank, and I'm gonna house the shrimp in the one on the left, excuse me there. And the water that will be flowing into the fast flowing tank is going to be unfiltered aquarium water, so it will still have some floating solids, some debris and something in there. So the shrimp are actually going to help me clean this up. They'll be in a relatively calm environment. There's no predators or whatever, and I'm hoping they will actually start breeding in there. They will produce some waste in there themselves, which is going to be beneficial because I've got the freshwater mussels, which are going to be really happy with this. And I'm basically going to place them everywhere because, as I said, they can filter up to 10 liters per hour, and anything they filter out is going to be less of a strain on my filter pump, which means less maintenance. And I'm actually hoping to get my setup to be so self-sufficient that I actually don't have to do any water changes, that I only sporadically have to take a look at my filter pump, see how it's doing, maybe change out one of the foams, but that's gonna be it. Now, on the right-hand side, I've got the slower flowing tank. I want to use the first compartment to produce or house snails, which are then hopefully going to procreate. And I'm going to crush those snails, feed them to my fish, and feed them to my ants. The other two tanks or compartments, however you want to call them, I want to use to breed water fleas, little crustaceans, and water striders. Now, obviously, I know they're going to be at the top, but I just had to put them over there. These insects obviously will be beneficial as they actually take out nutrients from the water, or polluting nutrients, I should say, and convert them into baby water striders and baby crustaceans that I'm going to be able to feed to my fish. Now, one thing to take into account when you're setting up any aquarium, especially in an aquarium that's surrounding a terrarium, is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen will be introduced to the water in the form of food for fish, or in my case, for instance, the dead ants and stuff like that, which after the fish eats the food will be turned into ammonia. That's actually a problem because it's very toxic. And actually, any plants that are decomposing in the tank will release ammonia into the water as well. Now, luckily, there are bacteria that will convert ammonia into nitrite, but they do require to take out oxygen from the water to do this. And then there's a second bacteria that will change nitrite into nitrates, requiring even more oxygen. So that's why it's important to have sufficient, let's call it airflow or oxygenation of your water, because this is actually what's known as the aerobic process. Basically because the bacteria use O2. Why is that interesting? Well, ammonia nitrate, nitrite and nitrate are all very toxic, and I don't want to end up with a lot of dead water creatures on my hands. So, considering that they're all toxic, and I'm left with, if this process is left to continue with a lot of nitrate in my water, I would have to do a lot of water changes to reduce nitrate levels in my water. Now, since I want to create a mostly self-sustaining biotope and I don't fancy changing the water, that's not going to be an option. So what's left to do? Luckily, plants use ammonia and nitrate to grow. So they're actually going to take care of this problem a little bit for me by just simply growing and using the stuff that's readily available in the water to grow and form their new stems, leaves, whatever. And cutting back these plants or removing them from the water actually removes ammonia and nitrate from the entire system. Thing to remember over here is maximum growth is maximum filtration. So I know it's counterintuitive. You think that having a lot of big plants is going to be very good for your aquarium, but it's actually the plants growing that require the ammonia and a nitrate. And if they have already grown to such an extent that they're not going to grow very fast, or they've reached their maximum height, maximum width, whatever, they're not going to be as beneficial as you think. But this is only going to take care of part of the problem, because there's still going to be a lot of nitrate left in the water, which is where anaerobic bacteria come into play. I want to try and get as many of these as I can, because they will actually turn nitrate back into nitrogen, which is a harmless gas. You'll actually see little gas bubbles in the water if they are produced by these bacteria. And they will provide me with some CO2 in the water, which is actually very beneficial to my plants, because they use that as sustenance. This is obviously called anaerobic process, because these bacteria have evolved in such a way that they don't need oxygen to breathe. They can actually take their oxygen by breaking down other chemical compounds that have a lot of oxygen in their connections. That actually completes the cycle, because now we're back to nitrogen. Now, how do I get these anaerobic bacteria? They prefer no or low oxygen environment. That presents me with a bit of a challenge, because my waters will be very oxygen rich for my fish and shellfish, and for the aerobic bacteria, they need a lot of oxygen. They prefer low currents. That's gonna be probably even more of a challenge, because I've got a filter pump circulating 2000 liters per hour, and my tank will have fast currents. So how will I create low oxygen areas? And what about the low flow? Let's start with the latter, low flow or current. And let's have a look at the setup as I just presented it. On the sides, the tank is about 12 centimeters wide from the terrarium part to the outer walls of the aquarium. At the front, it's 15 centimeters wide, and actually the little bay I created is 31 centimeters wide. And then actually at the bottom over there, I've got another 15 centimeter deep cave, which is going to be obviously it's going to be dark, but it's going to be a place for the shrimp to hide when they've shed their exoskeletons and when they're very vulnerable. It's probably also going to be a place where fish that don't like to come out until the evening or at night are going to be hiding during the daytime. Now, all of you, I assume, have watered plants using a hose. And you know that if you actually squeeze the end of the hose, you narrow the opening that the water has to flow through. And what happens, it actually starts to flow faster, because the rate of flow at the back is not going to be changed. So the water has to accelerate to get out. Now, what I've done with this tank is actually the opposite. I've made the opening wider. So if you press down on the end of the tube and you release your thumb, the water flow starts to calm down, actually starts flowing less fast or slower. That's what I'm hoping to achieve with this setup, because I'm actually giving the water more space to flow into. So that's going to reduce the flow at the front, and then as soon as it gets to the back, it will actually start flowing faster again, because the area it can flow through is narrower. Now, if we look at the back of the setup, this is the back of the terrarium looking at. I'm gonna put in a thick 10 to 15 centimeter layer of substrate and gravel, which means that there's going to be almost no flow at the bottom. And the bottom actually has very little oxygen as well, because there's low flow. When I just lay down this layer, there's going to be some oxygen at the bottom. Bacteria over there are going to use up this oxygen, but as there's not much water flowing in there to bring more oxygen, the oxygen is going to wear out. Actually, it says 10 to 15 centimeters. The layer depicted is 10 centimeters high overall. I'm going to raise the part in the middle, so there's going to be like a little mountainous, which is going to affect the water flow as well, which means that solid materials that are left in floating in the water are actually going to be more likely to drop before the hill, making sure that most of it actually remains in the main tank for my shrimp and other fish to gorge on. Now, another feature is actually these little dividers. They're going to be hidden in the soil, so you won't be able to see them. They're just there to actually prevent water from flowing even more. So I'm going to have a lot of hidden pockets of not flowing water covered by a thick layer of sand and substrate and gravel, which is going to be ideal for my anaerobic processes. Now, remember the refugium. Water's going to be able to flow more easily at the surface. That's going to be creating an area with lower current at the bottom. Also very thick layers of substrate and gravel over here, so hopefully there's going to be a lot of bacteria settling down at the bottom of my refugiums, taking care of the anaerobic process for me. Also, I'm going to be incorporating a lot of very fast growing plants. What they're going to do is actually absorb ammonium and nitrate from the water, as I explained earlier, and it's going to be easier for me to harvest them from the refugiums. I'm either gonna throw them out or I'm gonna feed parts of it by putting them back into the terrarium for the isopods to gorge on. I'm not sure how much the harvest, should we call it a harvest? Yeah, let's call it a harvest. The harvest of the water plant will be, so I'm guessing I'll just have to throw them out. But that actually removes a lot of the toxic stuff from the water. Then there's the filter pump as well. Remember this picture? The one I'm interested over here is the filter medium that houses the beneficial bacteria. I'm actually going to use BioHome Ultimate Filter Media, which is a very porous material, which means it's got a very large surface area for bacteria to settle down on. It's got added spore elements to boost the growth of these bacteria, and bacteria can actually house in the inside of these little pellets, let's call them pellets, which is going to be a low oxygen or anaerobic environment in itself. So on the outside is going to be housing the aerobic bacteria. The inside is going to be low oxygen anaerobic bacteria. So the more of this filter I can push into my filter pump, the better it will be. All right, so does this create more suitable or suitable enough surroundings? If all works out, my ants will be surrounded by clean water. I've got a food supply, natural food supply that is coming in from the aphids that provide them with the honeydew. I've got insects growing in the refugium. I've got shrimps to feed them. I've got snails to feed them. So that's pretty much covered. Also, I should add, if any of the shrimps die or any of the fish die, they will become food for the ants as well. So it actually completes the circle even more. I think they've got ample space to dig and they've got space to forage. There's a humidity gradient in the soil, so they can actually find a place they like best. My paludarium will be kept at room temperature, so yeah, the temperature of the soil should actually be very favorable. It's anywhere between 20 to 21 degrees Celsius during the day and 15 degrees at night in my room, which are good for these ants. They tend to fare best between 20 and 25 degrees, but this actually let me get back to that, because we have to worry about hibernation at low temperatures. Now, if you look at the setup, all this water is going to be kept at 24 degrees Celsius. That means that the outside of the formicarium is going to be heated by the water that's flowing around it. So actually there's going to be a heat gradient as much as well as humidity gradient in the soil. So the ants can actually burrow down, decide the warmer edge is going to be best for the eggs or larvae, or best for them to hang around or do whatever they please. But the inside of the terrarium is actually going to be cooler relative to the outside. Now that is going to be a problem because 24 degrees is not cold enough for them to hibernate. So how am I gonna cool down my terrarium without cooling the water? Because I've got subtropical fish in there that actually need the temperature. Now, the setup itself will weigh roughly 375 kilos. If you take the refugiums into account, that's about 650 kilos in total. So I can't really temporarily put that in a cellar because it's going to be way too heavy to transport there. Plus, the water temperature needs to remain stable. And even though I'm going to have a heater in there, if I put the entire tank in a colder environment, it's really going to strain the heater. And I'm guessing it wouldn't matter anyway, because even if the even if I put the entire tank in a cold environment, the water is still going to be heated. So it's not going to have much of an effect on the soil itself. So I started thinking, how can I cool the soil directly? Because that is looking the best way to actually get them to hibernate right now. Then again, I didn't really want to disturb the ants, so I had to get creative in how to do that. I want to keep the soil at a stable temperature, so I thought about ice packs, like for instance in the beginning, but that's going to be very inefficient because you're going to have to change them a couple of times a day. They're going to be very cold in the beginning, but then as they release their cold or actually absorb heat from the soil, they're going to heat up themselves and they're going to be less efficient in cooling the soil. So that wasn't really an option. And I wanted to create a system that I could turn on and turn off when I needed it. So it's only going to be for like a couple of months a year. I don't need it to be running 24/7 all year round. So I thought, what about if I actually fit a cable tray that can hold certain tubes running through them? And I connect them to a spiral that's made out of hollow metal, and I pump cold water through it. Now, say cold water from at about, I don't know, 6 to 7 degrees Celsius should be able to cool down the soil itself without affecting the water that's surrounding the terrarium. It's gonna create a cool spot within the soil itself. Obviously, ants will be able to climb through or dig through the openings in the spiral and the big hole in the middle, and actually bury this in the soil. So if you don't know it's there, you probably will never know it's there. So cold water is going to come in, run through the spiral, absorb the heat from the soil itself, cooling down the soil, and then the water that has actually taken this heat will flow back out of the terrarium. Where to? Because now I've got hot water running out, and I'm not gonna like connect this through my tap and let the warm water flow away through the sink. That would be a huge waste. Actually, I'm going to use one of these. Just your garden variety cooler that you take with you when you go camping. This is actually an electrical one, so I can just plug it into the power nap and it will continuously cool anything that's inside it. Now, for my purpose, I'm actually going to have to drill some holes into the side of it because I want to connect tubes to it, but I'm not going to use it to cool down bottles of beer, unfortunately, because that would be good, but I'm going to fill it up with water that's going to be kept cold, and the warm water will actually come back, flow through the similar spiral. So the warm water actually will be cooled by the cool water that's in there before being pumped back into the terrarium part. And that should hopefully cool my terrarium in the winter months when I need it. And if I don't need it, I'm just gonna disconnect the tubes, gonna drain the cooler, and I don't know, store it in the attic or somewhere out of sight. And then I can just get it back in, say, October when I need it again. Right, that's it for now. Really, I'm very eager to hear you guys' things. Those are my plans for creating the miniature biotope. My queens, oh, I really forgot about that. My queens have arrived already. They're doing very well in the test tube. They've got the first nanites. They're in a dark closet, and I am trying not to disturb them, as I said. And since this species doesn't develop very quickly, I still have some time to go before I will start building this setup. But I'm very eager to hear from you guys. If you know of any improvements I can make, please don't hesitate to tell me, because any input you have will be very valuable to me. And I'm actually hoping to give feedback on my setup once I've actually built it and use it to house the ants, so I can let you guys know how it works out and what works and what doesn't, what needs other improvements. That way we can actually all improve as ant farmers, because we are able to build better environments for them. All right, leave comments in the descriptions, contact me in the fora. My username over there is Hawkeye, because Hawk was already taken. I'm very eager to hear from you guys, and that's it for now. I'll see you when I see you.